Hello. How's everyone doing? Having a good festival so far? All right. I do have a public service announcement. Some of you have heard, but if you're parked to the north of the barriers in this parking lot, you need to move your vehicle because the marching band is going to start practicing, and the rumor is there may be tow trucks coming. So uh, please do move your vehicle. Um, I'm Jason McEntee. I'm the director of the School of English and Interdisciplinary Studies that never rolls off the tongue. And I'm very delighted to be here today and be part of the book festival as I've been for many years. But it's also an incredible honor and privilege to introduce our speaker for this session, Dr. Trent Preszler. Um, Dr. Preszler is a professor of practice, and as you know, a South Dakota native. He's a professor of practice and director of the Dyson Leadership Program, a rigorous immersion in systems thinking that empowers students to confront the complex societal challenges they have inherited. He was awarded the 2024 Henry David Thoreau Foundation Faculty Grant in recognition of his visionary work to foster leadership at the intersection of business and the environment, with undergraduate students as catalysts for change. His research focuses on sustainable business practices within the agriculture and forestry sectors and has been featured by the Wall Street Journal magazine, the New York Times, Esquire, CBS Sunday Morning. His memoir, Little and Often, published by the William Morrow imprint of HarperCollins, hit #1 on the Amazon Books bestsellers list and was a best book of 2021 in USA Today. His forthcoming book, Evergreen, will be published in 2025 by the Algonquin Books imprint of Little Brown. Having grown up on a cattle ranch on the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation in South Dakota, Preszler secured his first job after college, a White House internship for President Bill Clinton. He also holds the world record for building the most expensive wooden canoe ever sold, and a documentary film about his life won an Emmy Award in 2017. Um, Please, as I mentioned, he is a South Dakota native, so let's give him a wonderful South Dakota welcome. Please welcome to the stage Dr. Trent Preszler.
Ah, thank you for that wonderful introduction. You can hear me all right? Yeah? Thumbs up? Okay. This mic is a little wobbly. Um, I'm so thrilled to be here and good afternoon. I had this crazy idea that I ended up not doing, but I was gonna play a little trick and ask ChatGPT to write my speech. And then and I did that actually. I typed it in. I said, you're the keynote at a book festival in your home state. And the first sentence said, I always love going back to Tennessee. So I threw that out. And we're just writing from the heart now, not from the code. Um, I'm honored to be here and standing in front of old friends, new friends, family members, fellow book lovers, and authors. I haven't met this many authors in one place in a long time. A hearty thanks first to Jennifer Widman. I don't know where you are in this room. Is she here? She's probably running around with her hair on fire somewhere. There, yes. Um, Thank you, Jennifer, for organizing this whole event and for choosing my memoir, Little and Often, as the 2024 One Book South Dakota. Um, Now, when Jennifer first told me about this honor, I will admit that I Googled it just to be sure that it was a thing. And sure enough, uh, it is. It's a thing. And I was very touched. Maybe some of the authors in this room can relate, but at various stages after writing my book, I confronted this strange mix of emotions. There was the one part of joy and gratitude, but then this other part that kind of doesn't go away, where you think, "Oh my God, I just wanted to put some thoughts down on a page, and now a bunch of people want to read it." Ah, and there were days when I go to bed thinking that I wanted to take it all back and just stick my head in the sand, and I would wake up in the middle of the night sweating and muttering, like, "What have I gotten myself into?" And now all these people in South Dakota are going to read it too. Um, ah, but then dawn would break, and I'd settle in with a cup of coffee and begin to accept the fact once again that when it comes to my book, the proverbial horse has already left the barn. So uh, I may as well just admire the force of his haunches as he gallops away. Um, Being at this festival means so much to me, and I want to just acknowledge that there's a person not in the room right now. I think she's giving a competing seminar at the same time, Deborah Marquardt. Um, and she wouldn't remember me. I don't expect her to, and I was just one student in a sea of faces at Iowa State University in the fall semester of 1995. But Deb Marquardt was my freshman English professor. And I still carry with me a particular essay that she wrote about the Lawrence Welk show and what it felt like for her to come home. Ah, this just popped out. To come home to North Dakota after a long absence. And I remember in particular, she ended her essay with this line about following the loud, brassy supper call home. And that essay really stuck with me for years as a vivid reminder of how writers can create something and meaning out of the everyday, and how a single sound or a small detail can carry the weight of memory and time. So uh, Deb shaped the way I think about writing, and it's touching now to be here in the same event with someone who shaped my early understanding of storytelling. So thank you, Professor. This past June, Jennifer invited me to come back to South Dakota. And when we first talked about it, she said, well, we'd love it if, you spend some time going around the state because all these schools and libraries and museums around the state have read your book and stalked your book, and book clubs across the state have participated in discussions about your book. So I guess it's a whistle stop tour, but I said, sure, yeah, I'll do that. Like I'll come for a week. And so Jennifer's pretty ambitious. And I was thinking it would be, like one casual signing per day, and then I'd just sort of drift on down the road to the next signing. But Jennifer set me up for two signings a day. And it was like the shotgun. I was in one city, I guess they weren't cities, let's call them towns. Um, I would do a signing around the lunch hour, and then drive a few hours to another town and do a signing for dinner. Um, but each stop gave me a chance to reflect, and each stop provided me more than just an audience, but also a deeper understanding of what it means to return to a place that you left a long time ago. And the place that I thought I left, I remembered, was bone dry. Growing up here in the 1980s, drought was our constant companion. I remember the cracks in the earth, the dry air filling my lungs with the herbal scent of sagebrush, and that soft coating of dust on my skin that would kind of collect in the hairs of my arm and blend in, making me look perpetually tan. My mom would say, "You have olive skin," and I just think I was dirty. Um, and after yet another failed harvest, my father would kick clods of dirt in the field, and the dried up stalks of wheat would crunch under his cowboy boots as he stomped around the field, cursing up a storm for lack of rain. And these interactions happen to be where I first learned how one is supposed to curse, if so as not to sin before the omniscient, watchful eyes of an apparently extremely vengeful God. So when my father was confronted with the vagaries of ranching, rather than just letting loose with like, God damn it, this fucking drought was going to be the end of me, he would belt out something halting, more like, gall dang this flippin' drought. You see the difference there? So the former is a sin that could land you a prime spot melting in the eternal flames of hell, and the latter just sounds folksy. To this day, I wish my father had told me he loved me before he died. I also wish he had really learned to curse in front of me. So when the wheat dried to a crisp, like really curse, like howl at the moon style cursing, just like fucking let it all out, Dad. Just come on. But he always held it in, and I learned to survive with less. So imagine my shock when I flew into Sioux Falls this summer for my One Book South Dakota tour. And on the heels of a few gushers, there were storms that brought 4 inches of drenching rain, 8 inches, 10 inches in some parts. And I rented a car at the Sioux Falls airport and drove into these lush fields and swollen rivers, ditches as lakes, and valleys as inland seas, gravel roads as dam walls. hills as green oases, and this land had been replenished. The Technicolor chartreuse green prairies clashed with my long held image of the state as America's 50 Shades of Brown. I don't know if it was a matter of timing or the stars aligning or perhaps climate change and El Nino and all of that combined, but my book tour coincided with a summer of relative abundance here in South Dakota, a time marked by a quiet undercurrent of something that felt new to my experiences anyway of South Dakota. That is, until I saw a giant billboard on the interstate outside of Sioux Falls that asked in bold letters, "Where are you going? Heaven or hell?" I thought I was just going to Millbank. But the billboard reminded me of that unforgiving dichotomy that does exist in this state, and it still exists. There's this hard edge saying that you're either with us or against us, and someone else gets to determine your fate, because if you're different than them in any way, then you have to play by their rules, or else you'll face some nefarious kind of consequences. And as a gay man, I always fought against this appalling disregard for humanity. And in many ways, that's why I left the state. And I tried very hard not to look in the rearview mirror. I've been asked in many interviews what it was like growing up gay here. And I always say that like being gay actually saved my life because it forced me to get out. And I don't know where I would be if I were still here. Why would you willingly live in a place where people you interact with on a daily basis tell you that you're going to hell? No thanks. So I learned this morning, this is breaking news, that my book has been banned finally someplace. I'm so excited. Yes! Woo! So the DeSmet Library, if you're from DeSmet, raise your hand. Okay, we got to get our troops together. Listen, DeSmet had a book club discussion of my book back in, I don't know, April maybe, and there was a gentleman at the event this morning who came up on stage afterwards, told me he's from DeSmet, and that even though it's a publicly funded institution, the librarian is an evangelical Christian and learned that I'm gay. So I'm getting what's called a shadow ban. So I think they have to stock the book, but she's going to lock it in a cabinet somewhere in the back. It's like radioactive material. Like there's going to be these, I don't know, atoms spinning off of it that could give somebody cancer. So look out. But anyway, heaven or hell. And the battle against ignorance and bigotry does not end. My journey on this book tour began in Sioux Falls, where I had what I would describe as the most challenging interview of my writing career with the disarmingly precise questioner named Lori Walsh. Where's Lori? She's so beloved. Hi, Lori. For her show In the Moment on South Dakota Public Broadcasting. And I've done enough interviews to know that sometimes there's a journalist who asks you a question that lands like this big sentinel oak tree with wide spreading branches. And this tree is lush and green and hospitable and rich and porous. And as an author, you hear this kind of big question and you know that you can kind of climb up and around the branches of this oak tree and explore the gaps in its canopy while it shades you from the sun. And it's a comfortable place to be. But Lori asks the kinds of questions that don't give you those familiar hiding places. There's no room to duck and hide, and there's no scaffolding on low branches on an oak tree to climb up for safety. Her questions are more like a saguaro cactus. So if you try to dodge it, you're going to get stuck. But as it turns out, I love cacti. So as I tried articulating some themes of the very personal themes of my book, with Laurie smiling across in the other chair and the stage lights on, live studio audience in rapt silence, and my mother even sitting anonymously in the back of the room, I reasoned with Laurie how my memoir was not just about woodcraft or grief, it's also about legacy and what we take from the past, how we reshape it and pass it down. And as we dug deep together, the interview had me thinking about my roots in a way that I hadn't before. And she really challenged even my own brittle and incomplete understanding of masculinity. And for that, I wanted to salute and thank my new friend, Laurie Walsh. Someone needs to give her either a Pulitzer or an Emmy or a gift certificate to Minerva's. Now, from Sioux Falls, I made my way to Howard, and my Aunt Cecilia and my cousin Morgan from Howard are sitting right here in the front row. And I did a talk and book signing at the Minor County Historical Museum in Howard. Now, you might be asking yourself, I didn't know there was a Minor County Historical Museum in a town called Howard, and you would not be alone in that sentiment, but it exists. It's a thing. They just moved into a new location with the all new reinvigorated exhibit. Um, and there were family members there, along with a couple dozen community members, gathered around me in this exhibit room. And I was surrounded by, there was like an old plow or a grain threshing machine. Um, and then I was really taken with this glass curio cabinet by the front door that had a bunch of sepia tone photographs from the late 1800s and early 1900s. There was one photograph of maybe 20 or 30 men all dressed as women in black strapless dresses, wearing high heels, nylons, and feather boas. And it was 1899. I think it was some kind of, what was that? What's that? A play, a play in which 20 men dressed as women in black dresses. I love it. In 1899. I see you. I see you, queer people. Ah. But there was also a photo next to that of an elephant. So Howard in the early 1900s had a resident elephant. So apparently, after the railroads opened, the Barnum and Bailey Circus came through town, and they had abandoned or left behind one of their elephants. I don't know, by accident, or maybe the elephant had a mind of its own, and he was like, "I'm out of here." Um, so there's these photos of this elephant just casually standing on Main Street in in Howard, South Dakota, and there's one where he's like kind of leaning against a tree by a Lutheran church, and I don't know. I don't know if this elephant was maybe waiting for somebody to feed him a delicious apple. It wasn't really clear from the photo I saw, but elephants, we know they have a long memory, so maybe he was waiting for rain. From Howard, I made my way to Millbank, which has the distinction of being the only town in my 13 town tour where I didn't know a single person. And no one knew me. No one was a family member or a cousin or whatever. So it was just 50 perfect strangers in the library. It was a wonderful signing. Um, and there's a theme because I think there was one man in the audience and maybe about 59 women. Um, I'm going to come back to that. We're going to put a pin in that one. But so then I'm on my way out of town and I'm at a gas station filling up in Millbank. And this burly utility worker um, is filling up his I don't know, it's like the utility truck, the guys that work on the Highline poles, and he's wearing like an orange vest and a hat and boots. Burly, handsome. And so he looks at me. And when you're a gay guy, you learn really quickly that we're invisible to straight men. So you walk in a room of straight guys, and they have this like middle distance gaze that's just devastatingly indifferent. And they will look past you and around you and over your shoulder, but they very rarely look at you. And at least in New York, when a man happens to pay attention to you for just a split second and makes eye contact for 1,000, 1,003, they're gay. It's just like a rule. Or they want to beat you up. There's really nothing in between. I mean, they're either gay or bi or curious or living a secretive life on the down low, or they want to get it on with you, or they see you as the devil incarnate and they want to take you out back and beat you up. Um, and sometimes they want to do both. So it's the hookup followed by the beat up, which is a reality. So this harsh dichotomy again of being gay in South Dakota, or anywhere for that matter, comes up, heaven and hell and nothing in between. But I'm done with this book signing in Millbank, and this burly utility worker with the beard and the work pants and the boots is staring with me, and I think, what is this about? Is this one of those fleeting moments when you realize that life's tiny interactions, whether they're real or imagined, can lift your spirits or change your life in surprising ways? A reminder that maybe sometimes, even on the road, you're not invisible. So he's looking at me, and I'm looking at him, and pumping gas. And I'm thinking, maybe this guy wants to like kiss me or something. I don't know what's going on. I'm married. I don't know. But he walks over to me and I'm getting nervous. My palms are sweating. My mouth is dry. It's fight or flight, heaven or hell, hook up or beat up. And I am ready for any outcome. And he says, "Hey, you missed a spot shaving." Oh, oh, I did. Oh my God, I did. There's like a fuzzy patch. Oh yeah, sometimes when you're shaving in the razor, yeah. You know what? Thanks for letting me know. So, people in New York don't tell you if you have spinach in your teeth or toilet paper on your shoe, and they certainly won't tell you if you missed a spot shaving. But apparently, burly South Dakota men do. So we didn't hook up, and I didn't get beat up, but I did go back to the hotel and shave my head. In Aberdeen, I was impressed by the new Anderson Library. I don't know what they spent on that thing, 20 million, 30 million. It's beautiful. It's a gleaming spaceship from the sky. You all need to go see it. And their director of events is a fabulous woman with a ton of energy. And any college or university would be proud of this community library. Um, and three of my parents' college classmates showed up to pay their respects. And as we say in South Dakota, we had a nice visit. Um, and in Aberdeen is when it's the first time I kind of got grilled about my next book. It was like, yeah, 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 okay, Little and Often, but what are you writing next? And I appreciated the sentiment, to meet eager readers and fans who liked what they read in the first book and they want more. And this was a new experience for me because my first book came out during COVID and HarperCollins canceled everything. So my full experience of what it meant to do an author's book tour consisted of a couple of Zooms that just made me sad. Nick Offerman was gracious enough to host a Zoom launch for me on his Twitter on the hardcover publication date, but it was still like those OG early stages of Zoom when everyone was still figuring out how to use it. So we weren't pros at this yet, and nothing felt smooth. It all turned out more awkward than you had hoped. Like the camera was crooked, and I kept looking at Nick on the screen instead of looking at the camera. So the entire video, my eyes were like off in space, off to the right, like the middle distance gaze over someone's shoulder. And I wore these headphones that kept scratching on my shirt collar. The audio was terrible. And this was back before people started to realize that people paid attention to what was on the shelves behind you. So, I had like, I don't know, this collection of turtle tchotchkes on the shelves. And at one point, my dogs jumped in my lap and it was just a disaster. So, imagine me standing then in this gleaming $20 million library in Aberdeen with a room of people asking me questions about my book and what I'm writing next. And this was heaven. This was great. So, my next book is coming out next spring, and it's called Evergreen: The Trees That Built America. And I switched publishers for this one. I moved from HarperCollins and signed on with the Algonquin imprint of Hachette. But as Laurie mentioned this morning, we forget sometimes that authors, that this is work and you have to sit down and produce the words on the page, and that the people who pay you to do these things are generally running cutthroat businesses, and it can be brutal. And just a week ago, I learned that my editor got laid off as part of this big corporate merger where they restructured, and Algonquin is, I guess, going away and becoming part of the Little Brown imprint. And so for about a week, I wondered if maybe my book wouldn't be published anymore, or if I would have a publishing home for Evergreen. But actually, just this morning, my agent called with the news that they were just going to reassign me to a new editor at Little Brown. So it's still on. I still have the pub date of next summer, and crisis averted, and we're keeping it on schedule. Yes, thank God. But you're sweating for a while because being an author, you have these moments where you're racked with insecurities and you write things, and some days you think, I don't think that any of this is worth anything and no one's ever going to want to read this. And then you have other days where you feel in your gut that what you wrote, like the world has to see this. And when I finished Evergreen and clicked save and pushed my wheelie chair back from the desk, I leaned forward and I just cried because out of sheer relief and exhaustion, but also holding this conviction that I believe that what I did was pretty good, and I felt like I had a more conscious idea of what it meant to write a book because I wasn't doing it for the first time, like with Little and Often, where everything kind of felt like I was flying by the seat of my pants. This time I thought, people are going to want to read the shit out of this book, and they're going to talk about it and laugh and cry and feel stuff, and I really felt that, and so I couldn't believe for a week. I couldn't possibly believe that maybe I wouldn't have a publisher, but um, rewinding a bit, so there I am in Aberdeen in the beautiful new library, and I read the dust jacket copy for Evergreen. Evergreen leaps across the centuries and the forests that enabled America's rise to world domination and delivers a mind-blowing reflection on what it means to live on a dying planet where Christmas trees have always stood as silent witness to humanity's unstoppable ambition. With captivating prose and meticulous, in-depth research, Trent Preszler sets down what he calls is a story about trees that embody the struggle between what is natural and unspoiled and what is mass-produced and commercial. Like the branches of trees planted close together, Pressler manages to entwine our oftentimes garish and humorous holiday traditions with our longing for hope and immortality. To accomplish that feat, he weaves compelling narratives and a whole industry of breathtaking characters no one has ever seen before. From the ancestral Puebloans who carried whole pine logs strapped to their foreheads across hundreds of miles of the New Mexico desert 1,000 years ago, to the firefighters battling raging infernos in spruce forests dried to a crisp by a changing climate, to the destitute migrant hordes of axe-wielding homosexual lumberjacks who risked life and limb to stare down giant sequoias on steep mountain slopes, and finally to the modern-day paradox of suburban tree farms hawking neon-hued artificial Christmas trees that have become pandemic-era symbols of commercial excess. Even with the faith that its parts would at some point collide, Evergreen delivers a satisfying resolution that will leave readers pondering the delicate balance between nature, culture, and progress. Then came Faith. So, the town of Faith, which, as you know, because I think most people here have read the book, was the centerpiece in a lot of parts of my book and in my early life. And when I got to town, the main restaurant that I had known growing up, the steakhouse where my family ate to celebrate after we sold our calves at the Faith livestock auction, had closed during COVID. So I ate at the only place in town. It's this place called the Longhorn. And it's a bar that has one thing on the menu, steak with a baked potato, and basically one thing to drink, uh, Bud Light. So I asked for wine, and that did not go over well. Um, so I'm sitting there sipping my beer and gnawing on this giant piece of meat. And I strike up a conversation with this old rancher who's sitting next to me. And it turns out he knew my father, my grandparents, but in the loosely like associative way that ranchers know the last names of all the other ranchers within 100 miles. So it's not like they were personal friends, but he's like, oh yeah, the Presslers, sure. And then his two grandsons showed up to join him. Unbelievably, their names were Tucker and Hunter. Um, and they worked at a coal mine in Belfouche, and then they were rodeo cowboys on the weekends. And I told them what I was doing here. I told them about Little and Often, and one of the grandsons said, "Oh, well, our mom's birthday is coming up, so maybe we'll get it as a gift for her." And I said, "Or you could buy it yourself for yourself." And they looked at me with this confused expression, like what was I suggesting that maybe they read a book um, by this like homo from New York? I don't know. And then like a couple minutes later, one of the kids' girlfriends comes up and she says, "Aren't you that one book South Dakota guy?" And the brothers went quiet. But this is another theme that I'm going to revisit. So in Belfouche, we had a packed house, maybe 60 people strong, including some old ranching neighbors and one of my dad's favorite cousins, Margie. And grief is such a funny thing because for me, anyway, in my life, it comes and goes sometimes in waves like the ocean. And some days it's flat calm, and then other days there's this tsunami that roars up from the depths and knocks you over. But after the signing in Belfouche, which was raucous and fun and lots of participation and people that kind of knew me from my former life here. My dad's cousin Margie approached the lectern and gave me a big hug. And she says, I know your dad was tough and you went through some hard things, but you did it and I'm proud of you. And something overcame me and I just started sobbing. And Margie, who's 4 feet tall, gray hair, just hugged me. And I'm telling you, what a buzzkill for the book signing, because there were all these people waiting for me to sign their book. And, they just sort of quickly dispersed over to the punch bowl area because there were lemon bars. Thank God. If you ever want to throw cold water on a successful book signing, just start crying. So in Rapid City, I was really nervous. I got to Rapid City. My book signing took place on the same day as the first ever gay pride parade in Rapid City. First ever. So, my instincts go to a bad place because I'm always thinking fight or flight. So I'm thinking, well, it's the first gay pride parade. So that means there were probably counter protesters. There were probably the super Christians and the God hates fags people, and they were out there holding up signs. And I thought maybe someone was going to barge in the back like the Kool-Aid man and like come through the back of the room and start shouting me down in my book signing in this little conference room in the second floor of a library. So I actually intimated this fear to the crowd, to the people that had come to the book signing. And there was this woman who was sitting in the front row. She must have been 97 years old if she was a day. And she said, you don't have to worry about that because those people don't read books. So why would they come here? And she was right, of course, but I'm actually more worried about the fact that maybe all men aren't reading, not just the MAGA men. And I look around this room, and there's a few men, there's quite a few men, but I would say on my book tour it was 99% women. The audiences were women everywhere I went. Women were the ones who showed up, who bought the book, asked me the real questions, and shared their own journeys of grief and healing, which I found very powerful. And after my book signings, then in Pier and Gregory, I had another steak and Bud Light dinner at another local restaurant in Gregory. If you haven't been there, I don't know if I would recommend, but it was lovely. The people were great. I did have onion rings, so that was a bonus. But so I was chatting again. It was just me alone at a bar with some random farmer guy. So we start chatting. He's youngish, like he's maybe 30. And he turns out he came down from Canada on this contract. He flies airplanes like that dump herbicide over wheat fields on those vast wheat fields that line the western flanks of the Missouri River. And we talked for a little while, and our conversation stayed mostly on the surface, drinks, weather, food. But I could kind of sense something a little bit deeper underneath. I mean, he did come from Canada. Canadians are great, and he flies planes. I found that interesting. But the conversation leads to why I'm here, and it was deja vu to Hunter and Tucker in Faith because he says, "Oh, my mom loves books, so maybe I'll get it for her for Christmas." And I just couldn't help. It's like history repeating itself. I said, Why not for yourself?" And it's the same look of shock on his face. And he says, "Well, I just listen to podcasts while I'm spraying." Well, I said, "I have an audiobook recorded by Matt Bomer." Blank expression on his face. I'm really struggling with this guy. And maybe he felt sorry for me, but he did pull out his phone kind of and sheepishly order the audiobook on Amazon. But what does it say about us as men when we have to digest stories through headphones, and even then, maybe only when we're working with our hands or driving for long hours or digesting books that in a way where it's more of a multitasking thing than a leisure activity. And I don't know, I hate making these broad brushstroke generalizations, but in my observations across the state, why are men so disconnected from vulnerability that even reading a book feels like crossing some sort of line? Do men even read? I think they do. Yes, men read. Okay, right. Men write books too. Okay. And I wondered if I was observing a tiny data point or some kind of national crisis or trend. Um, and the answer is yes, it's a national crisis. National Public Radio ran a story just 2 months ago with the headline that women now dominate the book business, why there and not other creative industries. And an economist from the University of Minnesota crunched all the numbers, you can look it up, but found that while women only account for maybe 10 to 20% of, say, movie directors, cinematographers, and artists, women publish more than 60% of all books. Women sell more books, and women buy well over 80% of all books today in the multi-billion-dollar American book market. And also, women represent 78% of the entire labor force in publishing houses. So this is great. This is progress. I mean, men have dominated everything for too long, and it's nice to see an area where women can finally dominate. So that's awesome. And the flip side for me is a little disturbing because I wonder what's happening to boys and what are we teaching boys about what it means to be curious about the world around them. And I teach students at Cornell University. This year, I have a class of 250 students. And without giving specific examples, I have asked myself, what is wrong with the boys? And I've been doing this for 3 years now, and every year the students that perform the poorest in my class are male. And the ones that seem to not do the reading, and I never really have to have those same conversations with female students. I just don't worry about them as much. So men are known to hold things in. We know that men keep things bottled up. Men have a higher rate of suicide, higher rates of depression. These are all kind of well-documented statistics. But I'm wondering if men keep things to themselves um, and avoid discussions and narratives that might require them to explore their emotions. And I wouldn't know anything about that, right? Of the thousands of emails that I've gotten and Instagram DMs over the years since I wrote this book, um, the vast majority were from men. And it kind of tells me that maybe they are reading, but that they'd rather just process things privately and then send you a discreet email and it's done and over with. But maybe they don't need to gather in public places and communally process what they've read. But Laurie Walsh had asked me in our interview how little and often had changed or crystallized my views on modern American masculinity. And I stumbled over the answer then, and I still can't answer that question. But obviously, masculinity is a social construct, and its definition varies among individuals, so there can't just be one answer. But I wonder sometimes if it's grounded in a fear of appearing weak. Talking about feelings, about vulnerability, still seems somewhat taboo, and yet those things are just part of being human. And maybe it's just part of something else, like a deep social construct that tells men we're supposed to keep it bottled up and to solve our problems with actions, not words, which, as most of you know, is precisely what I did when I built a wooden canoe with my father's tools. I couldn't bear to actually address my grief. I just decided to um, beat it into submission by hammering some wood together. Which brings me to Timber Lake. My Timber Lake book signing happened in a library next to a museum filled with dinosaur fossils. And they had every kind of dinosaur, from T-Rex to Triceratops, the one with the big like shield behind their head, and nautilus and these seashells and clamshells, relics of the ancient inland sea that once ebbed and flowed in northwestern South Dakota. And in my book, I wrote about walking around the ranch as a kid and finding things like clamshells and laying in the dry, dusty prairie. And when I questioned how on earth marine animals ended up on our ranch, I was told in no uncertain terms that there was the Great Flood and Noah built his ark and the fossils existed. They were all the creatures that couldn't fit on the ark. So they drowned. So plausible. Um, but this museum docent in Timberlake, I don't know, is she here, the woman that owns the Timberlake newspaper? Hi, thank you for giving me the tour of the fossils. So, do you remember there's that like big animal with the giant teeth right kind of to the left when we walked in? There's like it's like was it the T-Rex? There's something that had big teeth. Yes, right. You said something along the lines of, "It's okay, you can touch it, it won't bite." So I was like, "Oh my God." I mean, these are big, serious teeth. Um, and it won't bite anymore, and its natural instincts for murder had been softened by 70 million years of calcification. So, like petrified wood, some of the actual bone had been replaced by minerals and rock. And what we see now in a fossil is a shadow of the past, the outline of something that maybe used to be terrifying, that used to be dangerous, something that maybe you used to want to run away from and never see again. And you see, after all those years, when you see it in the fossilized form, it doesn't scare you anymore. It might even seem quaint or charming to you now, but it certainly won't kill you. So, who are we when we come back to the place that we left? What parts of us are still waiting there to be discovered? And what soft parts of us have been filtered out over time and replaced by the minerals and rocks? And during this book signing in Timberlake, there was an old cowboy that sat across from me in a folding chair, wearing a big straw cowboy hat and wide suspenders that formed around his belly, barely contained by this crisp, pressed white Oxford shirt with buttons that were holding on for dear life. And he had this glint in his eye, and he was tough. Um, and in his hands, he held a copy of my book. He wasn't just holding it though; it was like he was squeezing it on both sides. And uh, someone else at this book signing, it may have been him, uh, gave me a copy of a 1985 rodeo program from the Timberlake Rodeo, and it was pristine. I held it up. It was like it had just come off the printing press. Not a single wrinkle, no sun fading, not a bent corner. Perfect. From 1985. And of course, there, if you flip through the advertisements for Skoal Tobacco and Budweiser, on page 8, there was my father, a contestant in the team roping competition. And this wonderful person thought I should have it. So the old rancher, the cowboy, looks at me and he says, "I want you to know that every single page of your book made me squirm. The whole thing made me feel very uncomfortable. But I finished it all the way to the end out of respect for you and your dad. And my life is better for it." It was hard, but he learned something. And he probably didn't always agree, but he felt something. And he struggled to maybe understand, but he believed that in the end, all his questions would be answered. So on the way out of Timberlake, I stopped at this corner gas station, which also served as kind of a community gathering spot for lunch, and with a line cook behind the counter making cheeseburgers. In New York, we call those places bodegas or delis, but without the gas pumps. So I ordered a cheeseburger and I waited. And behind the counter, up close to the ceiling, they had this row of plaques. I think they were wooden, but they had numbers and months on them. So it would say like June 2.5, July 3.1, August 0. And it turns out the owners of this corner store deli in Timberlake have been tracking the monthly rainfall totals in Timberlake, dating all the way back to, I think it was the Dust Bowl in the 30s, a very long historical record. So my cheeseburger took a while. So I was standing there waiting, and I waited long enough that I kind of scanned through the entire list. And this blur of numbers, months and years ticking by. There was the plaque for 1977, the year I was born. There was the plaque for 1988, the year that the financial strain became too much and my family had to leave the ranch. 1995, when I graduated from high school. 2010, when my sister died. 2014, when my father died. And I stood there staring at these numbers on the wall, and I was struck by the weight of them. You know that book, The Body Keeps the Score? In Timberlake, the deli keeps the score for the land, for the people, and for our shared history. South Dakotans remember the droughts, the hard times, the moments when hope seems out of reach. And like elephants, we etch those things into our deep memory. In my own life, I've recorded the cycles of scarcity and abundance with black and white words on the pages of books. And in Timberlake, they did the same thing with numbers for rainfall carved on plaques. So I took my burger and I went out to the street and I sat in my car. And I'm alone on Main Street in Timberlake. I pushed the seat back so I have room to kind of work on my laptop between me and the steering wheel. And in that quiet moment, I emailed the first draft of Evergreen to my publisher. There was a little Wi-Fi hotspot, and I zipped it right through the ether when I could. And it was ready. The book was ready, and it was time to send it in. So I started the car, and I drove to the horizon, and Timberlake faded into the rearview mirror. And soon it started raining again. And a deluge came so hard that and so fast that the windshield wipers of my rental car could barely keep up. And in all of life's messiness and unpredictability, you keep driving, you keep showing up, and you keep hoping. We go through dry spells, through droughts of connection and droughts of feeling. But eventually, if we're patient, the rains come. The rains do come back. I promise you this. And sometimes the rains come pouring down in the form of an old cowboy who stands in front of you in a little tiny library on the east side of a small town in a large state on the edge of summer, holding a rodeo program from 1985, explaining how your book changed his life and reminding you in that instant why you wanted so badly to become an author. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I believe we have time. Do, are we okay on time, Jennifer? Could we take a question or two? Okay. Um, yes. Hi. I don't have a Kleenex. I would give you one. Yeah. 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 It was like this speaker here, kind of like a chest. Um, and as I think most people who've been on ranches know, old ranchers don't just have one hammer and one rope and one screwdriver. So it was part of a whole panoply of things um, that my dad kept in tow. But um, yeah, the toolbox became like a mythical, uh, is a mythical creature. It still sits in the corner of my house, and I kind of walk around it and give it space. Like, whoa, yes. And things become larger than life, became larger than life that I pulled out of there. Thank you. Another question. Well, yes. Hi. For Little and Often? Um, well, we can thank my editor at HarperCollins for that. So, my book proposal originally didn't have that title, and he read the proposal and said, "I'll buy the book, but this is what we have to call it." And I said, "Where do I sign?" That's fine. Um, with my second book, Evergreen, it's my title, and I'm very happy with it. But yeah, I also wanted to make readers kind of wait until midway, almost toward the end of the book, to learn about the origins of the title and why it matters. But it's stuck. And the more I've lived in life, the more I realize that many things happen for people in that fashion, both good and bad. Nothing really happens in all one big flourish, and a lot of things we do happen a little bit at a time. And even dying happens little and often. So, uh, but so does living. Yes, sir. One more. Oh, okay. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah. 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 Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I've heard this. I heard that all across the state, honestly. Yeah, I heard a lot of similar stories. People whose maybe fathers were veterans or somehow shut down, and this is just the way we do it. And maybe Lutherans don't say "I love you," and but I know he loved me. uh, you know, and I think this might be part of the beauty of storytelling, that people can see themselves in a story. We may have uh, little in common in our everyday life, but we actually do have a lot in common. That's one of the reasons why HarperCollins wanted to publish this book. My editor grew up in Queens, and his dad was an auto repair mechanic in Brooklyn. And he felt like he never had acceptance from his dad. And his dad, even when Morrow became executive editor of HarperCollins, his dad never really said congratulations or anything. So um, it's part of the beauty of storytelling, where you can take something that's really, really specific, but also have it apply to a large swath of people. And I'm glad that you saw yourself in my story too. So thank you. Are we? Yes. Oh yes. Yeah. Yeah. So here's yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. There's a funny part about writing a book, that I got a similar question a couple different stops on the tour. And first of all, people want to interpret memoir so literally that they're sitting there with a pen and a pencil, inching out every moment of my life. Like, well, you know what? Let me think. Was that May of 1988? Because I think it was July of 1988. And I tell people that memoir is different from autobiography. I'm not giving you every single detail of my life, because I'm telling you a story. And you have to interrogate your memory and find the golden thread. And you have to know the story that you want to tell. So the story I wanted to tell was one about grief and loss and healing in the wake of my father's and sister's deaths, and how I built a canoe. And my editor made me put Dad, Lucinda, canoe at the top of in the top margin of every page. And if it wasn't fulfilling and in corroborating that story, I had to delete it. There are a lot of family members and friends that were not in the book. There are a lot of life events that were not in the book. One that you just talked about was my grandmother's funeral. So I actually went home to Lemon and Faith for my dad's mother's funeral, which happened the day or two before Thanksgiving. And then my dad died, and the whole story begins. But my editor says, we can't have 17 funerals in this book. Like, we have to pick a funeral and go with it, right? So we're going to cut grandma's funeral. And it becomes almost like writing a film screenplay, because, in a book, you get one chance to cry. and you get one chance to laugh and you get one chance to go to a funeral. And if you're crying in every chapter and going to a funeral in every chapter, then when you want people to feel something, they won't. Okay. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. No, I know it's true. It's true. Jennifer, are we okay? Am I getting the hook or no? Okay. Well, I don't want to, I mean, people will start walking out, but okay, you're right. It is a uniquely South Dakota thing. Yes, sir. I'm calling on the men for a reason because I went kind of I was hard on the men in this. Yeah. Yeah. I was lost. Emotionally lost. Uh-huh.
Reading your book, I don't think I've ever experienced reading a book that way because it felt like I was kind of with you there while you were doing it
Hmm.
through the working process,
Mm-hmm.
the tool, mastering those little tweaks,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, unfolding the flag at your dad's funeral.
Mm-hmm.
I myself had never witnessed that before.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Oh, wow.
Just,
Hmm.
I felt so sorry for that little gal up there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just wanted the idea that you bring people into that book is tremendous.
Wow. Wow. You know that you've just given me the greatest compliment an author could ever receive. Um, and if you didn't hear it in the back, he said that he felt like he was right there with me at certain moments of the book, and that he had never witnessed a military funeral where they fold the flag, but now he has because he witnessed it with me in my book. And uh, that's our greatest hope as writers, that we can do something where people see from our eyes and through us and can come along in this journey. You know, in the first 5 pages, I always feel like you want to take the reader's hand and reassure them, come with me, we're going to do this, and it's going to be okay. And you just affirmed that deeply. So thank you. Yeah.